Hey folks, how y'all doing? Welcome back. And oh man, in the land of grills, and yes we are, we got a challenge going on today between the Weber Jumbo Joe and the SNS Grills Traveler. The two are somewhat similar. We're gonna, I'll tell you what, we're gonna cook some ribs on there. It's gonna be a good one, folks. Can't wait to show it to you. All right, the setup on the inside is a big thing between these two grills because this manufacturer, SNS Grills, makes accessories that fits in the Weber Jumbo Joe. But I didn't think that would be really fair if we're doing a challenge between the Weber and the SNS to be using SNS accessories that make the Smoky Joe better. I don't know, I didn't think it was right. So as you can see, I've got the SNS, and if you got a Smoky Joe, folks, getting the charcoal basket, and obviously I could have used one, and I just, that's the SNS. Now here's a Weber charcoal basket. I was going to use that, but I didn't think that'd be fair either because it's smaller than the SNS. So we've put this is from Smoky Joe. It's a divider, and I was able to put it out as far as the SNS charcoal basket goes. So we'll have about the same amount of charcoal in each grill. Then instead of using the dripping griddle, I decided just to use an 8x8 pan. And you're wondering what the dripping griddle is. That's it right there. It's brand new. I got actually two of them that are brand new, folks. And they're so pretty. I don't want to get them dirty. I would line them with aluminum foil, but we're going to leave them both out. We are going to put some warm water in both of them. We've got our briquettes up there. If you're wondering what we're using, yeah, B&B. You know how I love the B&B oak briquettes. Longer, better, cleaner, just all around good. We've got 4 in that corner, 4 in this corner. We're going to use an electric hot air. I got the luft up there. We'll pull the luft off and get those 4 lit up, fill up the rest with charcoal, get our vents adjusted. Now vent adjustments can be a little different because vents are totally different on these. You can see we've got the classic Weber vent on the bottom, and on the SNS, look at that. That's pretty impressive. Plus, you see that black hole? We got a smoke hole too. So I've never cooked on this grill for the first time. So we'll experiment and see how that's going to run. Obviously, with that much air coming up, you would think that the SNS would run hotter than the Weber would. So we'll have to adjust it to try and keep it as fair as possible. But when it comes down to it, folks, it's not about getting them both to cook the same. It's about looking at the qualities of each one and which one is going to do better. Now, SNS does sometimes recommend that you put a gasket on the lid. I have chosen to leave the gasket, not put a gasket on there, because we don't have a gasket on the Jumbo Joe. Okay, so let's, I'm gonna get these fired up, take a look at the ribs, get them on, and let's get to cooking. All right, I got both of them started. See, we put some apple chunks on the bottom, and we're gonna cover that with the B&B. Get this closed up and take a look at the ribs. All right, so there's our 2 half-rack ribs. I tried to keep them as close as they can. They both have a bigger end. This one's bigger, this one's bigger. And weight-wise, I think this one's just a little tad bit bigger. For seasoning, I found this at Ace Hardware. B&B's making this Texas Trinity, which is, it's got salt, pepper, and garlic in it. Pretty nice stuff. And then you see a little bit of an orangish tint on top of that. I went for this Fire for Effect Sweet Heat from Burn Pit Barbecue. So I did spritz these a little bit with some apple juice. Yeah, how about that? I haven't used that in a long time. So we're going to spritz it a little apple juice, and we'll take a look at the grills before we put them on and see what happens. I just wanted to give you a look before we put the ribs on. We talked about increased airflow with the SNS, and if you're looking at smoke production and actually the temps, we're almost at 100 on the SNS, and no, don't criticize my temp gauge here. We're at 50 here. So, they're not at the same locations, but there's definitely more smoke, and we know there's more airflow with this grill. So if anything, we'll be throttling this one back sooner than this one. So you got to get some warm water in that pans, and then on with the ribs. All right, ribs are on. That's the temp right there. You can see it's supposed to get up 26. We do have a little bit of light wind, as you can see. Temps right now on the lid. You can see where we're at there, about 150-ish, coming up on the SNS on the Traveler, and then on the Weber coming up to 100 degrees. Take a quick look here. Ribs. Decided to put the smaller one on the Weber and the slightly larger one on the SNS ribs. So we'll keep going here, folks. I have a feeling I'll be throttling this one back first, and I don't know what I'm going to be doing over there. But I'm going to use the top vents to control temp. Leave the bottom vents wide open. On the Traveler, though, I may have to throttle the bottom back too, and maybe even go to the smoke hole. Oh, wouldn't that be exciting? All right, give me a couple look-sees, folks. All right, a lot of people are always ask about these tables. Tom, where can I get one of those? As you can see, they were made by Weber. They're not made anymore, and they're really cool because those four legs come off and store on the underside. And my challenge to SNS Grills is, well, I'll tell you what. If you want to come up with a great accessory for your portable grill selection, this would be it. On the Weber side, what it does is you can put the Smoky Joe, the Jumbo Joe, and the Weber Traveler in there. Then that lever locks them. You can see there's a bar there that moves. That locks them into place. Now they don't. The SNS doesn't fit in there, so I just put magnets down there to hold it in place. All right, here's a tip. One of the nice things about these grills, they have this bar that comes up to make this secure for traveling, and you can use that in cooking too, just to secure the lid a little bit more, and it works pretty nice. All right, folks, 2.5 hours into it. They've been closed down for 2 hours now. I haven't looked at a thing. Lid temps right now, the SNS, you can see what I've got the daisy wheel set at, and we are sitting right around 250. You can see what I got the Weber set at, and we're sitting a little warmer than about 300. That's, like I say, I haven't been open for 2 hours. Okay, ribs are looking good. There's our charcoal situation, not even half burned on the Weber. Let's take a look at the SNS. Ribs looking good. Same thing, maybe just a tad bit further burnt along on the charcoal, so we're doing good. Charcoal-wise, we're doing good. Temp-wise, if anything, maybe I'll just go a little. Now, unfair to the SNS, I've never cooked on this, where I've cooked a bunch on the Jumbo Joe, but they're both dialing themselves in pretty nicely. So we'll keep going. Maybe I'll give them a little spritz, and then put the arms back up, and then go for another 2 hours. I don't even know if I'm going to cover these ribs. So we'll give you a look-see as we go along. All right, folks, just coming up on the 4 hour mark. Lid temp here is about, see, a little over 300, maybe close to 325 on the SNS. And, look at that, about 325 also on the Weber. Let's take a quick look. Nice color, real nice color. I'm thinking I'm gonna wrap these. I've done 4 hours, and I think I'm gonna wrap them for 1 hour. And then, yeah, oh man, real nice color there too. A lot darker on the SNS. So we're gonna pull both of these. We're gonna wrap them with a little apple juice, put them back on, open the vents up, and go for like an hour. Pull them off, and then apply some barbecue sauce. I got some Blues Hogs Original, and I'll tell you what, I'm getting hungry. All right, 1 hour all covered, folks. That's on the SNS. This is on the Weber Smoky Joe, and we're gonna put a little Blues Hog Original on both of them. Back in the grill, probably for 10-15 minutes. Give you a look-see. All right, folks, there's the final product. Can you tell which is which? On the right side is SNS Traveler Jumbo Joe, and there's the Weber Jumbo Joe right here. Let's take a look at the. Most part they cooked pretty evenly. That's good. Let's try the SNS. Smoke ring looks like it goes all the way through. Oh, man, come on, a bite. All right, Weber Jumbo Joe. There's the SNS Traveler. Folks, can they both cook ribs? Hell yeah. Turned out great on both. I will tell you that the SNS, a little bit more bark. You can see that the smoke ring went all the way through. Didn't on the Weber. But that, I tell you what, a lot of you are going to look at the price and say, why should I bother? If you got a Weber Jumbo Joe, and you want to take it up a notch, you get the SNS charcoal basket, because that charcoal basket has a lot to do on how well that did over there. Having that sweep on the bottom of the SNS, that ash sweep that I showed you, and I'll leave a link down below to the review I did on it, big time. Because halfway through or 3/4 of the way through this cook, I went back and forth a couple times, got all the ash out of it, and kept it cooking good. Whereas on the Weber, you can't do that. So if you're going low and slow, once again, if you're going low and slow, if you're asking me which one to choose, and I'm gonna use it all the time, I'm gonna go with the SNS Traveler. If you want to do just hot and fast and occasional low and slow, there's no, you can do it on the Jumbo Joe. The mods I got on there really didn't make a difference other than the temp gauge on top, which kind of gives you a ballpark of where you are. So folks, I'll leave it up to you. Which one would you choose? Remember, price difference is huge between these two grills. So right, for me, if I'm going to do low and slow, and I want that smaller grill, I want better control, I'm going to go with the SNS. But if it's price, I'm going to go with the Weber, because it can do it just about the same. Folks, I hope this was helpful. Leave your comment down below, as you always do. I'd appreciate it. Thumbs up, leave a comment. Don't forget to subscribe. Tom Horseman at YouTube. Thanks for watching.